kind of idea. There is, once we thought that thunder was the voice of the gods, but now we've studied electricity and air movements and so on, and we now have a scientific explanation. And so as science advances, God retreats until he eventually disappears. But that view of God is not found in Christianity or any major monotheistic religion, where God is not a God of the gaps. He is the author of the whole show. Nor, incidentally, is he the God of the deists, who lit the blue touch paper to start the universe going and then retired to a vast distance. God both created the universe and constantly sustains it in existence. Without him, there would be nothing for physicists like Stephen Hawking to study. And in particular, God is the creator both of the bits of the universe we don't understand and the bits that we do. And of course, when we think about it, it is the bits of the universe we do understand that give the most evidence of God's existence and activity. Just as our admiration of the genius behind a work of art or engineering increases the more we understand it, so my worship of the Creator increases the more I understand the universe he has created. So that when Isaac Newton discovered his law of gravity, he did not say, now I know how it was done, I don't need God. No, he wrote the most brilliant book in the history of science, Principia Mathematica, hoping that a thinking person would, as a result of it, come to believe in the deity. It was in that same spirit that James Clerk Maxwell, who according to Einstein is second after Newton in the history of science as a towering intellectual figure, had carved on his Cavendish laboratory in Cambridge, "Great are the works of the Lord, sought out by those who delight in them." Now, one of the main conclusions of the ground design is this. Because there is a law of gravity, the universe can and will create itself out of nothing. Now, the first question to ask, I think, is what does Hawking mean by nothing? Because the first part of the statement is because there is a law of gravity. So Hawking assumes, therefore, that a law of gravity exists. And one might presume also that he assumes that gravity itself exists, for the simple reason that an abstract mathematical law on its own would be vacuous with nothing to describe, a point to which I shall return. But the main issue for now is this: the law of gravity is not nothing. And if Hawking is using the word nothing in its usually philosophically correct sense of non-being, there's something very strange going on here. So on the face of it, and this is one of the central statements in the book, it seems to me, Hawking seems to be simultaneously asserting that the universe is both created from nothing and from something. Now, one might add for good measure that when physicists talk about nothing, and I don't mean you to misunderstand that, when physicists talk about nothing, they often appear to mean a quantum vacuum, which is manifestly not nothing. In fact, Hawking is surely alluding to this when he writes, "We are a product of quantum fluctuations in the very early universe." I sometimes wonder whether this might be a little bit too much ado about nothing. But the situation does not appear to improve when we move on to the logic of the second part of his statement. The universe can and will create itself. Now, if we say X creates Y, ordinary language would tell us that we're presupposing the existence of X to bring Y into existence. That's a simple matter of what the words X creates Y mean. Now, if therefore we say X creates X, we're presupposing the existence of X in order to account for the existence of X. This is so obviously self-contradictory and also logically incoherent, even if we put X equal to the universe. Ladies and gentlemen, I submit to you this evening that to presuppose the existence of the universe to account for its own existence is something out of Alice in Wonderland, if not science. Now, it is very seldom in my experience to find in one single statement two distinct levels of contradiction. But Hawking seems to have invented such a statement. He says the universe comes from a nothing that turns out to be a something. And then he says that the universe creates itself. But this, fascinatingly, is not all. His notion that the law of gravity explains the existence of the universe is also self-contradictory. Since the law of nature, by definition, surely presupposes the existence of the nature it purports to describe. I find it fascinating that in this book, which says philosophy is dead, its key statement contains a triple self-contradiction. Philosophers just might be tempted to comment. That is what comes of saying philosophy is dead. Now, Hawking here echoes Peter Atkins, a colleague at Oxford, a well-known atheist who believes that space-time generates its own dust in the process of its own self-assembly. Atkins dubs this the cosmic bootstrap principle, referring to the self-contradictory idea of a person lifting himself by pulling on his own bootlaces. Philosopher religion Keith Ward is surely right to say that Atkins' view of the universe is as blatantly self-contradictory as the name he gives to it, pointing out that it is logically impossible for a cause to bring about some effect without already being in existence. Ward concludes, between the hypothesis of God and the hypothesis of a cosmic bootstrap, there's no competition. We were always right to think that persons or universes who seek to pull themselves up by their own bootstraps are forever doomed to failure. What perhaps all this goes to show is that nonsense remains nonsense even when talked by world-famous scientists. But what serves to obscure the illogicality of such statements is the fact that they are made by famous scientists. And the general public, not surprisingly, assumes that they are statements of science and takes them on that authority. And that is why I think it's important to point out, and I apply the same to myself, that not all statements by scientists are statements of science. And any statement, whether made by a scientist or not, should be open to logical analysis, because immense prestige and authority do not compensate for faulty logic. Now, the worrying thing I find is that this illogical notion of the universe creating itself is not some peripheral point in the grand design. It appears to be the key argument. And if the key argument is invalid, in one sense, there's nothing more to say. But since the laws of gravity play such a role in Hawking's argument, it might be important also to comment on the nature of law, because so far as I can see, there are serious misunderstandings lying what he says about this. Because his faulty concept of God as a God of the gaps now has the very serious consequence of leading him to present before the public a choice between God and science, or more accurately in his case, a choice between the God and the laws of physics. Now, of course, if you think more science, less God, that is an inevitable consequence of the logic of his argument. Talking about M theory, his chosen candidate for a unifying theory of physics, he said, M theory predicts that a great many universes were created out of nothing. Their creation does not require the intervention of some supernatural being or God. Rather, these multiple universes arise naturally from physical law. Now, a supernatural being, or God, is an agent who does something. In the case of the God of Christianity, he is a personal agent. Dismissing such an agent, Hawking ascribes creative power to physical law. But physical law is not an agent. Hawking, it seems to me, is making a classical category mistake by confusing two entirely different kinds of entity: physical law and personal agency. In other words, the choice he faces us with is a choice between false alternatives, because it confuses two levels of explanation: agency and law. Suppose, to make matters clearer, we replace the universe by a jet engine, and we are asked to explain it. Shall we account for it by mentioning the personal agency of its inventor, Sir Frank Whittle? Or shall we, following Hawking, dismiss personal agency and explain the jet engine by saying it arose naturally from physical law? Now this would be absurd. It is obvious we need both levels of explanation in order to give a complete description. It is also obvious that the scientific explanation neither conflicts nor competes with the ancient explanation. They complement one another. It is the same with explanations of the universe. God does not conflict or compete with the laws of physics as an explanation. God is actually the ground of all explanation, in the sense that he is the ultimate cause in the first place of there being a world for the laws of physics to describe. Now, there's more to this, because the laws of physics can explain how the jet engine works, but not how it came to exist in the first place. Jet engine needed the intelligence and creative engineering work of Whittle. Indeed, come to think of it, the laws of physics plus Frank Whittle could not actually produce a jet engine on their own. There also needed to be some material subject to those laws that could be worked on by Whittle. Matter, ladies and gentlemen, may be humble stuff, but it is not produced by laws. Now, the example of the jet engine can help us clear up another confusion. Science, according to many scientists, concentrates essentially on material causation. It asks the how questions. How does the jet engine work? It asks the why question regarding function. Why is this valve here? Why is that microprocessor there? But it does not ask the why question of purpose. Why was the jet engine built? What is important here is that the name Sir Frank Whittle doesn't appear in the scientific account. To quote Laplace, the scientific account has no need of that hypothesis because of what it is. But it would be very ridiculous to deduce from that that Whittle didn't exist, because he is the answer to the question, why does the jet engine exist in the first place? Now, ladies and gentlemen, I hope that all of you have noticed that scientists did not put the universe there, nor did their theories, nor did the laws of mathematical physics. Yet Hawking seems to think they did. When asked where gravity came from, he said, M theory. But to say that a theory or physical laws could bring the universe or anything at all for that matter into existence is to understand what theory is. Now, scientists love developing theories involving mathematical laws to describe natural phenomena, which enable them to make predictions, and they've done it with spectacular success. But most are aware, I think, that on their own the theories and laws that they find cannot create anything, let alone the universe. Our physical laws are a description, usually mathematical, of what normally happens under certain given conditions. This is surely obvious from the very first example that Hawking gives in his book. The sun rises in the east. But this law does not create the sun, nor the planet Earth, with east and west. It is descriptive and predictive, but not creative. Similarly, Newton's laws of gravitation doesn't create gravity or the matter in which gravity acts. In fact, it doesn't even explain gravity, as Newton himself realized. But it's even worse, or better, depending on your point of view. The laws of physics cannot even cause anything to happen. Newton's celebrated laws of motion never caused a pool ball to race across the table. That can only be done by people using a pool cue and the action of their muscles. Now, one can understand what is meant by saying that the behavior of the universe is law-like and governed by the laws of nature. But what can Hawking possibly mean by saying the universe arises naturally from physical law? Now, another example of this basic misunderstanding of law is given by the well-known physicist Paul Davies, with whom I had a fascinating radio debate recently. There's no need, he says, to invoke anything supernatural in the origins of the universe or of life. I have never liked the idea of divine tinkering. For me, it is much more inspiring to believe that a set of mathematical laws can be so clever as to bring all these things into being. However, in the world in which I live, the simple law of arithmetic, 1 + 1 = 2, never brought anything into being. I wish it did. It never has put any money into my bank account. If I put £1,000 into the bank today and later another £1,000, the laws of arithmetic will rationally explain how it is that I now have £2,000 in the bank. But if I never put any money into the bank myself and simply leave it to the laws of arithmetic to bring money into being, I shall be permanently bankrupt.